Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.
Deloitte Coalesce 2022 Art of the Possible. Broadcast by CNBC-TV18.
Hello and welcome to Coalesce 2022, The Art of the Possible, brought to you by Deloitte. I'm your host, Paramita Chatterjee. And today we are here on the show to talk about transforming in the times of uncertainty. Because indeed, in the last 2 years, companies have had to dramatically transform themselves towards the path of digitization, with the pandemic acting as a huge catalyst. But has digital transformation actually yielded the kind of results that companies were hoping for? Indeed, how can they really overcome the silos that exist within their organizations and work towards this common goal of transforming themselves on the digital path? Let's find out a little bit more from our panelists who are joining us on the show today, starting with Vinay Prabhakar, who is Ecosystem and Alliances Leader at Deloitte India, Vidya Rao, CIO at Genpact, and Josefa Motiwala, Director Systems Engineering India and SARC at Palo Alto Networks. Thank you so much for joining us. And Vinay, let me start with you because we are here today to talk about Coalesce and really coalesce in the context of transforming in the times of uncertainty and focusing really on the digital transformation, pathways that companies follow. As I said, it hasn't always delivered the correct results. Now, today, with 2 years odd of learning behind you, what would you advise companies in terms of the strategies they should adopt when they embark on this transformation journey?
Right. So thanks for the question. So coalesce to us, as by definition, means getting the best of brains or best of thoughts, right, together, and that's what coalesce means. So in the last 2 years, when you look at most of the digital transformation, it cannot be done independently. But what we have learned is the best of all coming together and creating that transformation story is what is the essence of digital transformation. And that's what we have learned. So not one solution will help you. I think there's multiple solutions that come together to solve a business problem or a transformation journey.
Indeed, and that's a journey, as I said. And Vidya, let me come to you because a company, the scale and size and complexity of Genpact, as the CIO, tell us how that journey was like, because a lot of companies struggle and, some have actually, brought about a change or management leadership team just to look at the digital transformation journey. Is that something you did as well?
Well, yes and no. So look, in the past 2 years, we have been hit by the pandemic. I think that is the biggest change that we all have envisaged or experienced in the 2 years. And none of us were actually prepared to deal with the pandemic. So it was almost learning. So we did not have the time to put together a change management team just to drive the change. What we though did was we put together a SWAT team to ensure that people are able to, the first step towards digitization is how do you embrace remote working? What are the type of technologies? How do you move things to the cloud? So as Genpact, we had started taking some steps in the initial years before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, everything was enhanced. Right. So we did put together a team. You can call it the change management team or the leadership team, but it's not necessarily so. It was a team to address the immediate need. But over the 2 years, there has been very specific initiatives in the digitization agenda for which we are well planned. And hence, there is a management team which is responsible for driving changes, ensuring that the culture of the people changes, ensuring that we handhold our teams, handhold the entire organization to embrace the change.
Jose, if I can come to you, I know Palo Alto looks at security, but typically one of the challenges that companies face is that they're all working in silos, and security is typically not first of mind. Yeah. Security is something that comes as an afterthought, usually when a cyber attack has taken place. So how do you address security in the context of transformation?
Yeah, it's a great question, and let's kind of take a step back that any company who's sort of trying, from a cybersecurity perspective, there are three pertinent questions that they try to answer. One is visibility. What am I trying to protect? Second is exposure. Am I being exposed? And the third element is threat protection and sort of incident response, which is, am I under attack? And if I am, how can I protect it from going across? And very interestingly, with the transformation that has been gone through, and she mentioned in terms of the change coming in, we're suddenly coming and walking into a very perimeter-less world in terms of work is no longer a place; it's an activity, right? You can't say, you're not saying that I'm going to work. You're starting work, right? So which means that in these days, day and age and time, you could be accessing from any device to any application, lying anywhere, sitting in a coffee shop to anywhere else, right?
The perils of the phygital world.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's a new
term,
term, right? So how do you? So in this, when the continuum has shifted, right? How do you ensure that security becomes bolt-on? Security shifts left.
So essentially, look at security in a different way. Don't think of it as an afterthought.
Absolutely.
But bolt it on right on in the beginning of your journey.
Absolutely.
Okay, because these are complex decisions, and Vinay, especially for companies who've got legacy systems and they keep thinking, okay, let me just stretch this a little bit more, because choosing the right technology is a very complex matter, especially when it comes to enterprise technologies. There's so many offerings at play.
Yeah.
What's the right way to really approach this?
Well, you rightly said that. When is the right time to go for a transformation, or when is the right time to digitize, right? And I strongly believe that, well, it was yesterday, because almost every problem that we want to resolve is around, and we need to be agile. We need to get information to kind of make decisions. So hence, going digital is going to be a normal right now, right? And there are many technologies available, right? And I believe that for every step or every decision that any company and any organization undertake, our recommendation always has been to kind of run a POC, if you like, kind of test the waters on what is best suited for the organization, how does it fit into the overall architecture before you make that decision.
So don't bite off more than you can chew.
Absolutely.
Take small pieces.
Digital transformation, in our view, is always a journey. It's not a step-by-step. It's not an immediate, leap that you take. It's always a journey. So you have to take those incremental steps before you actually go through the whole transformation.
That's interesting. So don't jump head in and say, listen, I'm just going to change everything overnight. And I can see, Vidya, you are nodding your head because, as I said, it's a complex. Do you agree with what Vinay is saying? And how did you translate that into, reality when it came to Genpact, and particularly in onboarding your entire team? Even for them, these changes in technology are a lot to handle. They are unfamiliar with it.
So I agree with what Vinay says. So it has to be very strategic, very thought through, very methodical way of doing things, right? I can't overnight make a decision that I'm going to deploy or I'm going to digitize one piece of my architecture. It doesn't work that way. So there is a process. We sit together as a team, identify why we need to digitize and what's the purpose, and really see the cost benefit analysis of the same. There is a cost to it. It doesn't come, it's not cheap at all, right? But having said this, ensuring that, as you rightly said, how much can you bite? Do I need to transform the entire enterprise? Maybe not. Maybe I transform networks first. Maybe I transform my integration layer first, or my front end user experience first. To each is a very different technology, and to train people is even more challenging.
Okay.
So there's a right balance. There are a lot of ways of training or cross training our employees. We put them through extensive learning programs, or we give them opportunities.
But did you have the luxury of time? Because it was like, everything had to be done, almost transformation had to happen overnight. Now maybe you can step back a little bit.
So Paramita, the answer to that is, fortunately, and maybe I was one of the fortunate organizations where we had started the transformation earlier on. So for example, we were moving all our data centers onto AWS cloud, right? And this journey had started. So I already had people who
In fact,
knew.
great that you mentioned the cloud, because I can see Josefa is nodding vigorously, because that's what most companies have done, right?
Yeah.
They think the first step in digital transformation has to involve the cloud in some way or form. There's a huge amount of acceptance. But what does that actually mean? And typically, a lot of companies have a lot of concerns, and at the same time, they think security is sort of taken care of to some extent by perhaps the provider themselves when they go on to the cloud. what's the right way to go about it? Because once you're on the cloud, you're also a little bit more vulnerable, are you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a great question, and it segues into let's take a step back and see how people adopted cloud, right? There were two approaches predominantly, if I can say. One was a lift and shift approach. So you kind of take the legacy thing and you're trying to make that work in a cloud environment. And the other thing was developed starting in the cloud, so-called cloud native way. So you're kind of creating new age modernized applications right in the cloud.
So is that what you did, Vidya? Because you're...
We did a lift and shift. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, so the thing is, in both the cases, when you go to cloud, the biggest thing that people need to understand that security in the cloud is a shared responsibility model, right? So service provider is supposed to be securing the cloud, of the cloud, and you're responsible for securing in the cloud, in the sense the data application is still your responsibility, right? Now, if you take that lens, and then, as you said, the cloud adoption is, 80% of the time, people have adopted cloud, 55% or close to that is multi-cloud, right? So it's about, based on where that application and stuff like that. The idea is, when you get into that journey, how do you ensure that either it's your lift and shift, or you're developing code and writing native application?
Right.
How do you ensure that your security is baked in right at the time when you're writing the code?
And you've said a very important point, and I think it's educative as well, that your responsibility doesn't end as a company the minute the data goes on to the cloud, because it is, after all, your own data which is going on to the cloud, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So just to add to that, right? I mean, transformation, not everything that you move towards digital or cloud is transformation, because transformation is change in people, process, technology, all put together, right? And so I don't think everything that goes towards digital is transformation, because it could be one-off pointed solution to a particular problem. But when you talk about transformation, you're talking about a whole change of process, people, technology, so on and so forth. So I guess transformation possibly is an overused word as well for everything that we do.
And a lot of people think, okay, I've gone on to the cloud, that's a big part of my transformation. But you're saying, no, it has to be...
That's one step, a small step towards transformation.
On that note, let's take a short break. You're watching Coalesce 2022, The Art of the Possible. Stay with us for more.
Deloitte, Coalesce 2022, Art of the Possible, broadcast by CNBC-TV18.
Welcome back to Coalesce 2022, The Art of the Possible, and we are here to discuss digital transformation in the times of uncertainty. Let's talk about, dollars and cents, because all of this costs a lot of money, and Vidya also alluded to it. So, how do you sort of go about also planning your investment roadmap alongside this kind of transformation that you're taking?
So, immediate step usually is when you do the lift and shift, etc. So you get benefits by moving on to the clouds, because you save on certain hardware costs, etc., right? And these are the small incremental benefits that you get. But the real ROI, if you like, is when you start looking at what is the change of process that happened. Are we doing this, whatever process has moved to the cloud? Are you doing that in a more agile manner? Are you in a position to actually get some rich data out of it? Can you monetize that rich data for the benefit of the organization? So the ROI is not necessarily related to hardware costs. It is long-term as well. So as I change my process, as I change my technology, as I change my people, the cost-benefit analysis happens and the ROI increases dramatically, because now you're doing the same thing in a much better, enriched manner.
Let me take that point across to Vidya. Vidya, you said you started your digital transformation journey began earlier. And hence, you were also able to calibrate in terms of the return on investments that you're seeing, and you're also able to see those returns earlier. Have you actually seen those returns?
Yes. So, from a cloud perspective, absolutely. So he alluded to two models. So, we went with lift and shift. So, we did not transform anything on-prem. We just took whatever we had on-prem and moved it to the cloud. The next step is to transform on the cloud. Okay, so that's the approach we took, because it is faster, it's cheaper in terms of the cost that we actually put, and the return ROI is much higher. So the business case works better for us, at least in our setup. It worked better if I did a lift and shift into the cloud. Now the next step is, okay, now I have a cloud. Now look what we did with the cloud. Once we moved everything to the cloud, there was a need for a certain application to be built within the enterprise, for which we needed data. So we said, okay, we do have AWS. So why don't we build a data lake? So we actually built data lake. We pulled a lot of our financial data, our operational data into the data lake. And we have now started using the data for different purposes within the enterprise.
So you first integrated all of that data coming from various sources.
Bits of data, whichever we needed.
Security is usually seen as a cost for companies. Do you think that's a sort of a mindset change that is required?
Yeah, it's interesting, and very often we get the question that how much is enough? How much should you invest in cybersecurity against what? And here I think it's very interesting to take a step back and look at a risk-based model, right? Figure out who your crown jewels are, which means your data, your business applications and criticality, and get a risk-based approach which could be driven out of, if I lose a particular thing, what's the financial risk associated with that? What's the soft risk associated or cost associated with that in terms of your brand, in terms of your services to your customers and stuff, and then start building out a risk-based profile. My pet peeve is people often take a very compliance-driven approach to cybersecurity. I need to get compliant to something. I'm going to do a tick mark thing.
So basically, like the financial services space will say, compliance is forcing me to invest.
Yeah. So, I've done ABCD things and I'm compliant and I'm good to go. Risk-based approach is what will help you kind of put in the right guardrails, right? And that's where I think vendors and partners like us come in and help define that, because that's our forte. Right. That's where we are sort of.
And that's an important differentiator. And Vinay, let me come back to you here, because let's talk a little bit about the cultural transformation, because is it somewhat easier, for instance, for digital native companies to undergo or go through this journey of transformation, as opposed to, say, brick and mortar companies, with long history, long legacies, because there's a lot of cultural shift and acceptance that is required from the top down?
Ideally speaking, you have your mobile, upgrades, you move to an upgraded version of the mobile. You don't question what technology transformation it has gone through, you start using it. So ideally speaking, it should be that easy, but it is never that easy, right? And for some, when it comes to organization, the business, there are multiple factors that play into that. Includes the number of years the person has used that process, how much the individual is used to that, and all these transformation, the change in culture, etc., takes a little bit of time for people to start adopting to it. Because now,
So should companies typically, because time is of the essence, they need to be competitive, bring in the technology, the culture will take care of itself, or does it have to be a sort of side-by-side process?
It has to be a side-by-side process. People should start, that becomes into the DNA of the organization moving forward, right? If they adopt a transformation kind of a journey.
Right.
And so I think it's a step-by-step process. It's not something that happens immediately.
Basically, culture and technology have to coalesce.
Coalesce, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about ESG, environmental, social, governance. That's part of it's become a KRA, a key goal for all companies now, in fact. And a lot of the digital transformation is either necessitated because of these ESG requirements. How do you sort of look at the two, transformation in the context of ESG and the way it has become a key demand now for companies?
I guess everyone has been contributing towards carbon footprint and ESG in a manner that is conducive to a company. However, if you look at it, at least the way we feel is, ESG is not just about counting the carbon footprint or so on and so forth. It actually goes through many. In fact, it is embedded in all the areas of the function, be it supply chain, be it manufacturing, be it even customer services. For example, how many trips are you making? So if you start making multiple trips to do your service, then you're adding to the carbon footprint. So can I reduce it? So to reduce that,
and digital transformation can help you achieve that.
So it actually tracks in every aspect of a business function.
So the two are complementary. Yours is a listed company, so it's a key requirement.
And whatever Vinay said, spot on. Travel is a big contributor to carbon footprint. So the whole concept, especially thanks to pandemic again, digitization, data democracy, you're giving data to people, then why do they really need to go the data virtualization is absolutely there. Moving to the cloud, it is again helps you in ESG. So I think every aspect, every department, every function, for example, even data centers moving to the cloud is a big direction, one step in direction of ESG. Yeah. So absolutely.
So through the digital lens, companies are automatically fulfilling a large part of their ESG requirements. I mean, Jose, if I turn the lens inward, Palo Alto is also a listed entity. I mean, this is a key demand of shareholders as well. How did you sort of address this internally when it came to your own transformation?
We did, and you asking a very pertinent question. When you look inwards and you sort of try and eat your own cooking, right? So the amount of in terms of automation that we put in internally to ensure that we are using the right amount of resources, including in terms of the compute power, in terms of the manpower, in terms of the outcome. We've kind of brought down our sort of carbon footprint drastically, and our commitment is there to kind of get towards that carbon neutral or carbon zero path towards that. So our products are sort of aligned to that whole vision, right? In terms of ensuring that how do you come in and reduce that entire journey and do that. So we ourselves are our biggest example of using and eating our own
Fantastic. And that's what I think customers want to know, because let's talk a little bit about the future, Vinay. It's a fantastic, occasion. Lovely focus, Coalesce 2022, 2 years after the pandemic. We are sort of taking stock and looking towards the future. So what does the future really portend in this sort of hybrid, phygital world, these new terms that we're coming to deal with?
I think the more you coalesce, the more innovative you get, the more brain power you put into it. So I guess the mantra would be to coalesce all the more.
Vidya, in key terms, what's going to be your key focus areas from here on as CIO?
I think the power of getting, the data, the networking, the compute, everything together can actually transform this world for the better. And I think going forward, that's going to be the new normal as well.
Josefa, final word from you?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Our vision statement is make each day far more safer and secure than the one before, right? So which means we are looking at the future. So you use the word coalesce, you use the word future and hybrid. So future is, we are futuristic and outlook. We are seeing where the puck is going rather than where it is.
On that note, it's time for us to wrap up this very special show of Coalesce 2022, the art of the possible. And indeed, we've learned a lot from our speakers about the key levers that companies need to pull in order to embark successfully on the journey of transformation during these uncertain times. Thank you so much for watching.
Deloitte Coalesce 2022 Art of the Possible, broadcast by CNBC-TV18.
Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.